72-year-old mechanic works quietly in the motor pool at Randolph Air Force Base. His hands shake when he drinks coffee, but they're rock steady when he holds a wrench. Young airmen laugh at his faded badge, dismiss his old-school methods, and push him aside when a VIP vehicle breaks down. "We don't have time for you, Pops." But when their rushed repair fails and the base faces disaster, the old man fixes it in minutes. What no one realizes is his worn badge holds a secret from the Cold War. And when a 4-star general steps out of his motorcade and walks straight past the commanders toward this nobody mechanic, everything changes. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? The laughter started before the old man even picked up his tools. Ray Thornton was 72 years old. His hands shook a little when he drank his morning coffee, but they were rock steady when he held a wrench. Every morning he came to Randolph Air Force Base at 5:30, half an hour before the young airmen showed up. This Tuesday morning was the same. He signed in, nodded at the security guard, and walked toward Bay 3 where a broken fuel pump was waiting for him. The young airman saw him coming. "Look at that old guy," said Airman Devin Carr, pushing his friend's shoulder. "Grandpa's here again." Someone laughed. Ray's ID badge hung around his neck on an old lanyard. The plastic was faded from the sun, cracked at the corners, and the photo inside was barely visible anymore. It looked ancient. To these kids fresh out of training, it was something to joke about. "What is that badge?" Another airman said loudly. "Did they even make plastic that long ago?" More laughter. Ray heard them. He always heard them. But he kept walking, his boots making soft sounds on the concrete floor covered with old oil stains. His knees hurt from arthritis, but his steps were steady. He had learned long ago that some people only understand a lesson after it hits them hard. The base was coming alive around them. Jets were moving on the runways far away. Generators hummed. Big hangar doors rolled open with loud metallic sounds. Randolph was a training base, a place where young people learned to serve their country. But respect, Ray knew, was not something they always taught here. He put down his toolbox and pulled on his work gloves. Behind him, the airmen smiled at each other, already making another joke. They had no idea who they were laughing at. Ray had been working on the base for 3 years now, ever since his wife passed and the empty house became too quiet. The job kept his hands busy and his mind sharp. He worked slowly, checking each bolt twice, cleaning parts that others would have left dirty, reading manuals that younger mechanics said were outdated. The airmen hated his pace. "Come on." "Pups, we don't have all day," Staff Sergeant Miguel Torres said that morning, watching Ray inspect a hydraulic line. "Just swap it out and move on." Ray didn't look up. "This line feeds the braking system. You want to guess or you want to be sure?" Torres rolled his eyes and walked away. By noon, the entire motor pool was buzzing with nervous energy. Word had come down from the command building. A 4-star general was flying in tomorrow for a surprise inspection. Not just any inspection. This one involved the new Joint Training Initiative, with Pentagon eyes watching. Every vehicle had to be perfect. Every tool in place, every surface clean enough to eat off. The pressure fell hardest on the command vehicle, a modified SUV that would transport the base commander and the visiting general during the tour. It sat in Bay 1 and it had a problem. The engine was misfiring, cutting out randomly. Nobody could figure out why. Ray walked over during lunch break. He stood beside the hood, listening to the engine idle, his head tilted slightly. "I can fix this," he said quietly. Torres looked at him, then at the 2 younger mechanics already elbow-deep in the engine bay. "We got it covered, old man. This needs to be done fast, not slow." "Fast and wrong is still wrong," Ray said. "We'll handle it." Torres turned his back. "You stick to the simple stuff." Ray watched them for a moment. They were pulling sensors, checking wires, guessing at solutions. He recognized the problem from the sound alone. A fouled injector, 3rd cylinder. 15-minute fix if you knew where to look. But they hadn't asked. and he had learned not to push. He walked back to his bay, the badge swaying gently against his chest, and picked up his wrench. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Tomorrow came with a crisis. The command vehicle died at 6 in the morning, 4 hours before the general's plane was scheduled to land. Torres turned the key again. Nothing. Not even a cough from the engine. His face went pale. Behind him, a small crowd had gathered. Mechanics, NCOs, even a captain from the command staff who kept checking his watch like it might slow down time. "What did you do?" The captain asked, his voice tight. "We replaced the sensors, checked the fuel system, cleaned the throttle body," Torres said quickly. "It was running fine last night." "Well, it's not running now." The captain's jaw clenched. "Fix it." "You have 2 hours before we need to move it to the flight line." Panic spread through the bay like spilled fuel. Airmen started pulling tools, shouting suggestions, checking connections that had already been checked twice. The noise rose. Metal clanging, voices overlapping, someone swearing loudly when a wrench slipped. Ray appeared in the doorway. He walked through the chaos like a man walking through his own living room. No hurry, no wasted motion. He reached the vehicle, popped the hood, and leaned in close, his ear near the engine block. "Try it again," he said. Torres turned the key. A weak click. Nothing more. Ray nodded slowly, his fingers already moving along the fuel rail, checking connections. His hands didn't shake now. They moved with the certainty of someone who had done this 1,000 times before, in harder places, under worse pressure. "Third cylinder injector," Ray said. "Fouled. I told you yesterday. We don't have time for I told you so," Torres snapped. "Can you fix it or not?" "I can fix it." Ray pulled his toolbox closer and started taking apart the fuel rail. His movements were precise, careful. Around him, the airmen had gone quiet, watching with a mix of hope and impatience. Then Sergeant Kyle Brennan spoke up. He was 24, broad-shouldered, the kind of guy who thought being loud made him right. "What's that badge even mean, old man?" Brennan said, loud enough for everyone to hear. He pointed at the faded lanyard around Ray's neck. "Seriously, is that from the Cold War or something?" A few airmen laughed nervously. Someone else muttered, "Probably his first job." Ray didn't look up. His fingers worked the injector free, inspecting it under the overhead light. Fouled just as he thought. He reached for the cleaning solvent. "I'm talking to you," Brennan said, stepping closer. "You think you're better than us because you've been around forever? That badge looks like trash, man." More laughter now, louder. The tension in the room needed an outlet, and Brennan had found one. Ray set the injector down and looked at Brennan for the first time. His eyes were calm, steady. The kind of calm that comes from seeing real things, hard things. Things that make a motor pool argument feel small. "Hand me the torque wrench," Ray said quietly. Brennan blinked, caught off guard. Someone passed Ray the wrench. If respect is earned by how we treat people, think about that for a moment. Ray reinstalled the injector, torqued it to specification, reconnected the fuel line, and checked every connection twice. The captain kept glancing at his watch. 58 minutes left, 55:50. Ray straightened up and closed the hood. "Try it now." Torres climbed in, hand shaking slightly as he turned the key. The engine roared to life. Smooth, strong, perfect. Ray wiped his hands on a rag and picked up his toolbox. He walked back toward his bay without a word, the faded badge swinging gently against his chest, while behind him the motor pool erupted in relieved chaos. Master Sergeant James Holloway had been standing in the back of the bay the entire time. He was 52, a career NCO with 28 years in, and he had learned to watch before speaking. While the younger airmen celebrated the running engine, Holloway moved forward slowly. His eyes locked on something specific, Ray's badge. He stopped 3 feet away, his head tilting slightly as he studied the faded plastic. The laminate was cracked, the colors washed out. but underneath Holloway could see the design, a shield, wings, a number sequence that made his breath catch. "Sir," Holloway said quietly, the word carrying weight that made Ray pause. "May I see your badge?" Ray turned, surprised by the tone. He lifted the lanyard from his chest and held it out. Holloway took it carefully, like he was holding something sacred. His eyes moved over every detail, the issue date, the designation code, the small emblem in the corner that most people would miss. His face changed. "Where did you fly?" Holloway asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Long time ago," Ray said. "Different life." Holloway handed the badge back with both hands, then stepped away and pulled his radio from his belt. He walked toward the bay entrance, his back to the crowd, and keyed the transmit button. "Command post, this is Holloway. I need you to pull service records for Raymond Thornton, civilian contractor, motor pool." He paused. "Yes, now. And notify protocol. We have a situation that requires command awareness before the general arrives." The airman stopped talking. Something in Holloway's voice had changed. He stood straighter now, his tone formal, almost reverent. Torres and Brennan exchanged confused glances. "What's going on?" Torres asked. Holloway didn't answer. He was listening to his radio, nodding slowly. "Copy that, understood, I'll stand by." He turned back to face the group, his expression unreadable. Before anyone could ask another question, the captain's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, and his eyes went wide. "The convoy's arriving early," the captain said. 15 minutes. Everyone to positions now." The relief in the bay evaporated instantly, replaced by electric tension. Airmen scattered, grabbing rags, checking fluid levels, forming up outside. Torres sprinted to move the command vehicle to the flight line. Holloway remained still, his eyes on Ray, who had returned quietly to his workbench. The old man was wiping down his tools, one by one, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. Arrival, reveal, and vindication. Holloway's radio had changed everything, though no one understood why yet. The motorcade rolled onto the tarmac with quiet precision. 3 vehicles, the base commander's sedan, 2 staff cars, and finally a black SUV with small flags mounted on the front. The formation of airmen stood at attention along the flight line, spines straight, eyes forward. Torres, Brennan, and the others were positioned near the command vehicle, freshly washed and idling perfectly thanks to Ray's repair. The door of the lead SUV opened, and General Marcus Webb stepped out. 4 stars gleamed on his shoulder boards. His service dress uniform was immaculate, rows of ribbons telling decades of service across his chest. He was 68, gray-haired, with the kind of presence that made even senior officers straighten unconsciously. The base commander moved to greet him, but General Webb raised a hand gently. "One moment." "Colonel." The general's eyes swept the formation, then moved past it entirely. He was looking toward the motor pool, where Ray stood near the bay entrance, still in his grease-stained coveralls. Holloway had quietly asked him to stay, though Ray hadn't understood why. General Webb walked directly toward him. The airmen's heads turned slightly. Breaking protocol, confusion rippling through the ranks. Why was a 4-star general walking away from the official greeting, away from the commanders, toward the old civilian mechanic they had been mocking just hours earlier? Ray saw him coming and straightened slightly, unsure what was happening. The general stopped 3 feet away. His eyes dropped to the badge hanging around Ray's neck, the same faded badge Brennan had called trash. For a long moment he simply stared at it. Then slowly and deliberately, General Marcus Webb raised his hand in a crisp salute. Ray's breath caught. Instinct took over. His own hand rose, returning the salute. Muscle memory from 50 years ago flooding back. The general held it for 3 full seconds before dropping his hand. "Gentlemen," General Webb said, his voice carrying across the tarmac as he turned to address the gathered airmen. "Some of you may be wondering about this badge." He gestured toward Ray. This is a test pilot insignia issued by the Air Force Flight Test Center at Edwards Air Force Base, vintage 1973. Only a few hundred were ever issued. He paused, letting that sink in. Mr. Raymond Thornton flew experimental aircraft during the Cold War, jets that didn't have names yet. Programs so classified that even today I can't tell you half of what he did. The airman stood frozen. Brennan's face had gone pale, his earlier laughter dying in his throat. The aircraft he tested became the foundation of our modern fleet. The general continued. The avionics, the engine systems, the flight controls you all work on today. Men like Ray risked their lives proving those systems worked. Some of his colleagues didn't make it home. Ray's jaw tightened. Old memories surfacing. Faces of friends who had pushed experimental jets past their limits and never walked away. After his service, Mr. Thornton chose to return as a civilian mechanic, not for the pay, not for recognition. General Webb looked at Ray with clear respect. He told me once he did it to stay close to the work. To keep serving. The silence on the tarmac was absolute. General Webb extended his hand. Ray shook it, the general's grip firm and warm. Thank you for your service then, the general said quietly. And thank you for your service now. He turned toward the command vehicle, the one Ray had repaired while being mocked. I understand this vehicle had some trouble this morning. Yes, sir, the captain said quickly. Mr. Thornton diagnosed and repaired it. The general walked around the SUV slowly, inspecting it with an expert's eye. He opened the hood, glanced at the engine, then closed it carefully. Looks perfect, he said. Then he looked directly at Brennan and Torres. You're lucky to have him. Neither of them could meet his eyes. Reckoning. Lesson and institutional fix. The general's words hung in the air long after he moved on to inspect the rest of the base. The formation broke up slowly, airmen returning to their duties with unusual quietness. No one made jokes. No one rushed. The motor pool felt different now, heavier somehow, like the weight of what they had done was finally settling on their shoulders. Ray walked back toward his bay, ready to finish the day's work. He had almost reached his toolbox when he heard footsteps behind him. Mr. Thornton. Ray turned. Sergeant Brennan stood there, his hands clasped in front of him, his shoulders hunched slightly. The cocky confidence from this morning was completely gone. His face was pale, and when he spoke, his voice shook. I need to apologize, sir. Brennan's eyes were fixed on the ground. What I said about your badge, about you? I was wrong. I was disrespectful. I'm sorry, Ray studied him for a moment. The kid looked like he might be sick. You didn't know, Ray said finally, his voice calm. But now you do. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Judge the work, not the worker. Judge what someone does, not how old they are or what they look like. That's the lesson. Brennan nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, sir. I understand. Ray extended his hand. Brennan shook it, relief flooding his face. An hour later, the base commander called an impromptu meeting in the main hangar. Every mechanic, every crew chief, every airman from the motor pool stood in formation. The commander stood on a small platform, his expression serious. What happened this morning should never happen again, he began. We have civilian contractors on this base who are veterans. Some of them served before most of you were born. Their experience is a resource, not a joke. He paused, letting his words sink in. Effective immediately, we're implementing a new protocol. All civilian veterans will be properly recognized during new personnel orientations. Their service records, when declassified, will be made available so you understand who you're working with. He looked directly at the motor pool crew. We're also launching a mentorship program, pairing junior airmen with experienced civilian veterans. You will learn from them. Master Sergeant Holloway stepped forward. I want to be clear about something, Holloway said, his voice carrying authority earned over decades. That badge Mr. Thornton wears represents more flight hours in experimental jets than most of us will ever log in our entire careers. He flew aircraft that could have killed him on any given day. He did it anyway. He let that settle. Humility isn't weakness. It's strength. Real strength doesn't need to announce itself. Holloway's eyes swept the crowd. Mr. Thornton could have told you who he was at any time. He didn't, he just did the work. That's what a professional looks like. The airman stood silent. The lesson landing harder than any reprimand ever could. Epilogue and value-based CT 3 weeks passed, and the motor pool found its rhythm again. But something fundamental had changed. Ray stood in Bay 3 on a Thursday morning, an engine block disassembled on the workbench in front of him. Beside him stood Airman First Class Devin Carr, the same kid who had called him Grandpa that first morning. But Carr wasn't joking now. He was listening, a notebook in his hand, his eyes following every movement Ray made. "See this bearing surface?" Ray said, pointing with a clean rag. "You check it twice. Once with your eyes, once with your fingers. Scratch you can't see might be something you can feel." Carr nodded, leaning closer. "Yes, sir." Ray handed him the part. Carr inspected it carefully, running his thumb along the metal, then held it up to the light just as Ray had shown him. "Feels smooth," Carr said. "Good. Now you know." Across the bay, Torres was working alongside another civilian veteran, asking questions instead of giving orders. Brennan had requested a transfer to the mentorship program. Even the captain stopped by some mornings just to watch Ray work, learning techniques that no manual could teach. The faded badge still hung around Ray's neck, but it looked different now. Someone had carefully cleaned the laminate, and though the plastic was still cracked and the photo still faded, it carried a new weight. Everyone who saw it understood what it meant. Skill doesn't fade with age. Neither does sacrifice. Neither does character. If anything, they deepen, refined by years and tested by time. The loudest voice in the room is rarely the wisest. The flashiest credential is rarely the most meaningful. Real excellence doesn't need to announce itself. It just shows up early, does the work right, and goes home quietly. Ray Thornton had learned that 50 years ago in the cockpit of jets that didn't have names. He was still teaching it now, one engine at a time, to a new generation that was finally ready to listen. If this story reminds you that every veteran carries a story worth hearing, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to honor those who served and comment below. How do you show respect to the veterans in your life? The camera holds on Ray's badge one last time, the worn insignia catching the light, before fading slowly to black.